So now that that's done, let's create our first test. Before we get started, let's reorganize and add a couple folders to help us with our structure. We're going to be, in this class, we'll be using the page object pattern for our automation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder and call it pages. Basically, a page object pattern has, each page has its own methods. And by its own methods, I mean, for instance, the login page will have a login method or a navigate to, or it can verify that it's a not page, or whatever other things that page might have. So it might have a search, or it might have a refresh, and so on. So now that we have a page folder, let's move our first class into it, and we'll rename this class. We're gonna rename it to login page. And we'll rename it here as well. Login page. Now we're gonna create in our test, we're gonna create a folder that will house all our tests. We'll just call it tests, and we'll move this unit test folder into it. And we're gonna rename our very first unit test. Let's name it user can log in. We're gonna build our solution so that we see that this test exists here now. Now what we're also gonna do is include the framework so that we know where we're referencing. So I'm gonna type up using Lowe's automation framework, and we're gonna start automating. So the first thing I wanna do is navigate to the login page. So I'm gonna say login page, and you can see that it populates because we have this using command, and we're gonna say that go to. As you can see, we don't have that method created. So let's create that method. So when you highlight over this, you can see that there is an option that says generate the methods tab for the go to in the Lowe's automation framework.login page. So I'm going to click on that. And what that's going to do is if when I go to this login page, you'll see that there is now a method that's called go to. Now we want to change that method. Let's also rename our tests to login tests. Let's create a way for our go-to to open a new instance of Firefox and to navigate to the Lowe's URL. First, we're gonna add the reference by typing in using OpenQA.selenium.firefox, and then we're gonna create a new instance of the driver. So we're gonna say var driver equals new Firefox driver. And then we're going to tell our driver to please navigate to our URL. So we're going to say driver dot navigate dot or dot go to URL and say http backslash backslash www.lowes.com. And I'm going to click save and build this project or build the solution. And I'm going to run the selected test to verify that the page opens and that it actually goes to the Lowe's website. Great. Now we know that our web page launches, but let's tell the test to verify that same information. The way we're going to do it here is by creating an assert. So we're going to say assert is true login page is at, and if it's not true, we're gonna say login page was not found, or we weren't on the Lowe's web page. So as you can see, that is@, command is not created. So let me right click it, or just let me hover over it and say generate properties tab for is@, in the Lowe's Automation Framework login page. Once that's done, if I double click this login page, you'll see that it created the method that's called is@, and it has two properties, a get and a set. In our case, we only want to use this get, so we're going to change it a little around. So we're going to say get. Now, what do we really want to get? How do we verify we're on the Lowe's website? So the first thing that jumps to mind is maybe using this URL. But before we can move on, we notice that, I noticed that we have a big problem, is that I don't have access to this driver navigate because it's in a different method. So before we can proceed, we need to create a global way in which we can access that driver. So before I move on, let me just return a false so that this compiles. So now let me give you guys a chance to catch up to where I'm at. Here are the steps in case you need them.